Today's story is Folie Deux by Kenneth Cole. We humans live a simple life, happily ignorant of what goes on around us. In 4th century Greece, everyone knew that the earth was flat, covered with a firmament of heavenly bodies. In the 17th century, everyone knew that the sun was the center of the universe. Imagine that I can change your mind about what you think you know in the next half hour or so. Once you have heard my story, it will change the way you look at the world forever. For most of you, I suggest that you stop listening, walk away, and forget what I am offering. For you select few who believe that you can handle the truth, close your eyes and listen carefully. But don't say that I didn't warn you. I see them. Don't you see them? That's odd, isn't it? Thomas captivated me in the first few minutes that I had met him. Day in and day out, as a psychologist at Windsor, one of the oldest mental health institutions in Ohio, I grew used to meeting the same types of patients all the time. Manic depressives, addicts, and the occasional schizophrenic. Nothing of note, certainly nothing that would get me published in the Oxford Journal. Until Thomas, that is. Thomas was a genius with a higher IQ than Einstein. As an academic prodigy, a largely unpleasant person, and an outsider who thought that he was superior to others, Thomas believed that his characteristic qualities exempted him from the societal rules that governed all other people. In other words, a sociopath. But the most irritating thing about him was that he was good at it. It made me want to like him despite his offensive personality. I consistently tried to appease him, acting as if he was correct, and failing to see his hallucinations was a character defect on my part. Are they there now, Thomas? He sighed. Yes, Doctor. They are always here. Here, there, pretty much everywhere you look. He was speaking of his friends, of course. He claimed that they were constantly with him, watching over him, or perhaps just watching him. They were everywhere, he claimed. There was nowhere that he could go to be alone. Even in his locked room, they had the ability to crawl under the door. I could sense that he was becoming frustrated, and, to be honest, so was I. Pushed too far, Thomas would fall silent and then refuse to participate in our sessions. Sessions that I had come to look forward to. For the next few days, I had tried to address the incident that had finally brought him to Windsor. He had somehow managed on the outside for a surprising amount of time, given his, condition. I relaxed into my chair and tented my hands. Well, perhaps you should be going back to your room to rest for a while. I called an orderly and had him escort Thomas back to his room. Thomas and I both referred to it as his room, to avoid calling it what it was, a cell. There were no padded walls, no steel doors, but it contained nothing other than a steel shelf with a thin mattress as a bed, a table and a stool bolted to one cinder block wall, and a stainless steel toilet with no lid. Thomas's only possession was a small pink rubber ball. That seemed safe enough. When he first arrived, we had allowed him to have a nub of a pencil and a pad of paper, so that he could write down ideas and record his dreams, what I thought might provide insight into his way of thinking. We had to take those away from him after he used the pencil, only 2 inches long by design, to stab a nurse in the ear. He did this just for fun, by the way. Now he isn't even allowed a pencil during his group therapy, although I do allow him to doodle during our sessions against the better judgment of my superiors. Thomas would often comment that, were it not for his friends, he would go crazy being locked in with nothing to keep his mind active. He could regularly be heard talking behind his closed door. Some of the staff even swore that he heard other voices answering him. There is a name for that sort of paranoia. It is called Folie Deux. It's a shared psychosis, a usually harmless condition in which 2 or more people share the same delusions. Owing to Thomas's unusual intelligence, it was no surprise that he had the ability to bend the imaginations of his nurses and orderlies. He could be very convincing. he often had me self-guessing as well. Thomas was unexpectedly chatty the next day. The orderly who had delivered him to my office took me aside and said that the nurses had heard him conversing with his friends throughout the night. They said that he sounded excited and was even shouting at times, and of course some claimed that they heard other voices responding. Nevertheless, I felt that it would be a good time to bring up the incident. Do you know why you are here, Thomas? Damn, I shouldn't have started off with an open-ended question like that. He spent the next 20 minutes in a discourse about the philosophies of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, and providing his own thoughts on existentialism. He did not misunderstand my question. He was toying with me, but I allowed it in the hope that he would open up about the incident. He loved to talk, especially about himself. Once he got going, he was easy to guide into other subjects. Going down the rabbit hole, as it were, I never knew where we would end up. Neither of us did. Thomas, you had previously told me that your mother could not handle you anymore. I broached the subject. I have spoken with her, and it sounds as if she acknowledges your intelligence and loves you very much. So whose idea was it to have you come to Windsor? He furrowed his brow. Now, Doctor, don't test me. You know very well that no one can force me to do anything that I do not agree to. My dear mother tried homeschooling, as you are aware, because she loves me very much. She asked me to check myself in for a short period because she was convinced about my recent changes in behavior. She does not and cannot understand. She is of mediocre intellect. I don't say that as an insult, it's just the truth. Nonetheless, I love her and I want to make her happy. And this makes her happy? Having you here and not at home with her? He shrugged and looked out the barred window to our left, exhibiting his mounting uneasiness. I'm growing bored of this, Doctor. Get to the point or send me back to my room. I don't wish to miss lunch. I hear that it's a meat cutlet today. He chuckled. Though they've never told me what it's a cutlet of. Is it pork? Is it chicken? Do they even know? I called his bluff. All right then, Thomas. You obviously know what I want to talk about, so why don't you just go ahead? We can talk for as long as you want, or... I paused for effect. I can have the orderly take you back to your room, so that you don't miss lunch. Fine, Thomas paused. Mother couldn't handle me anymore. She knew how smart I am. She'd tell the teachers that's why I wasn't getting along well at school. I was smarter than the other kids. Hell, smarter than most of the teachers, and they were jealous. They would pick on me and bully me, not just the kids, the teachers too. They had the nerve to send me to the school counselor. Me! Not the bullies. The counselor would make me so mad with her stupid questions. Not very much unlike yours, Doctor. I finally beat her with a paperweight. It was nice. The paperweight, that is. Just big enough to fit in my fist, smooth, pink marble, heavy. They had to pry it out of my hands. I wanted to keep it, but the cretins wouldn't let me. I don't know why. She wouldn't be interested in it anymore. I had already known the background, but it was startling to hear him talk about it so calmly. So, I encouraged him, your father, where was he during all this? Thomas shook his head. Gone. He was gone. Mother said that he was ashamed of me. He never discussed me with his friends, even when they asked. He probably could have dealt with my little outbursts, but after he saw my friends, he just went away. I was aware that Thomas's father went away, as he called it. I knew, however, that he hadn't left his wife and son. He had committed suicide. I was certain that Thomas knew that, but as with his delusions, I allowed him the fantasy that he had invented for himself. Thomas's last sentence was what caught my attention, though. Thomas, you said that he went away after he saw your friends. Did your father see them too? He leaned forward in his seat, conspiratorially, now interested in what I was saying. Not at first. Initially, he was just like everyone else. He didn't believe me, but then I taught him the secret. Secret? What secret? He smiled. I'm getting tired now, Doctor. I was up late last night. I should go. Thomas, I protested. What secret? You can't leave me hanging like that. He turned and placed his hand on my desk, his face so close that I could smell the stink of his breakfast on his breath. You can't look directly at them, Doctor, he whispered. Not at first. They won't let you. You can only see them when they don't want to be seen. The orderly took him away. He turned his head as they crossed the threshold and called back. Only when they don't want to be seen, Doctor. The orderly closed my office door. I twisted around in my seat to pull Thomas's file out, and I could have sworn that I saw something. Out of the corner of my eye, a tiny man standing there and staring at me. When I turned my head, he was gone. I could hear Thomas laughing as the orderly marched him down the hall. Are your eyes still closed? Good, don't peek now. The next days were filled with madness. At first I laughed at myself because I had become so jumpy seeing things that weren't there whenever I turned a corner or walked into a room. Then I started to become concerned when it became virtually impossible to concentrate on anything else. I grew to hate Thomas for the thoughts that he had put into my head. I canceled our daily sessions and then referred him to another psychologist. I thought that being away from his influence for a while would allow me to forget what he had said. Nevertheless, I continued to see them, the little men. And now it seemed that they were becoming bolder, entering my field of vision a smidge more, idling there a bit longer. Weeks passed in this manner before I finally decided to confront Thomas and put an end to this folly once and for all. I had Thomas sit down, and I asked the orderly to close the door and wait outside my office. As soon as Thomas and I were alone, I bared my soul to him. I should have known better than to do that with a sociopath like him. I was desperate, though, but I managed to keep that fact to myself. I explained why I had stopped seeing him, and told him that if he went on in this vein, even continued to insist on the very existence of these Lilliputians, I would stop seeing him again. Thomas bent closer to me, lowered his voice, his face playful and wicked. Doubt is a poison, Doctor. A drug. As addictive and self-destructive as any other. Do not allow it to rob you of your senses. Do not let it take this away from you. You are so close now. I had nighttime visitors. The first time I woke to them, I immediately asked myself if there had been other visitors before. In the dim light, they seemed braver, no longer hiding themselves. A chill shook my body, but I remained calm. Hello? Came out as a question instead of the declaration I had intended it to be. And then, I'll be damned, they answered me. Well, at least I thought they answered me. They could just as well have been talking amongst themselves. They spoke in a language unknown to me. I stared at them and listened to them speak, ignorant of what it was they were saying, until one by one they ambled away, going I know not where. I could not wait to speak to Thomas the next day. I had my assistant clear the entire morning and asked them to bring Thomas down earlier than normal. I told him what had happened and he was so excited. We both were. He finally had a friend. Yes, I was now a friend who understood him, and I finally had a subject for my paper. I could already see it in the Oxford. What title would I use? My thoughts raced with hundreds of ideas. I ran them by Thomas, asked him for his help. I even asked them, but I could not understand their responses, not yet anyway. Thomas promised that I would someday. I spent the better part of a year putting together that article, allowed Thomas to proof it, and then distributed copies to my peers for their review. I was so excited. Then, I had my hopes dashed to smithereens. Dr. Eli, my esteemed colleague at the institution, entered my office unannounced one morning. He left the door open so that everyone could hear. He viciously threw the unbound manuscript on my desk, scattering the pages out of order. What in God's name is this, Doctor? Some sort of elaborate joke? A 300-page fairy tale? His face, already red with anger, began turning darker, perhaps even purple. Accepting deviant minds? Why hallucinations are as real as the self? He hissed the title I had chosen. Took me a week to come up with. I was very proud of it. He went on and on. I'll admit that I went blank and only heard snippets of what he was yelling about. Wasting my time. Demand an apology. I'll have your job. All I can say for certain is that with each harsh word, my friends became more and more annoyed. I saw them all the time now. I'm not sure about the details of what happened next. I remember that my gaze drifted toward the crystal paperweight on my desk, the one that I had been given when I received the Mental Health Provider of the Year for back in 2007. I recalled what Thomas had done to his school counselor. The paperweight he had used sounded much prettier, but I was certain that this one would do nicely. Before I was aware of what had happened, 2 orderlies were wrestling me to the floor while a nurse injected me with a strong sedative. My colleague lay on the floor in a pool of blood. It was still gushing in spurts from a head wound, so his heart must have still been beating. I'm happy that I had showed enough restraint to avoid killing him. They didn't let me keep the paperweight either. That's okay. I never really liked it that much anyway. It was very garish. I just felt obligated to keep it since someone had gone through the trouble of having my name etched into it. Now, I no longer have an office. I have a room, just like Thomas's. In fact, I'm just down the hall. My psychiatrist thought that staying at Windsor, where all my other staff knew me, would not be conducive to my recovery. I pleaded, however. I convinced him that since Thomas and I shared similar delusion, it might be best to treat us in unison. It took a considerable amount of coaxing, but I think that the mention of co-authoring an article for the Oxford Academic Journal, when I felt better, of course, was what finally caused him to give in. To be honest, though, I simply wanted to be near Thomas. He was the only other person in the world who understood me, for now. They come here every night. I see them. Don't you see them? That's odd, isn't it? Are your eyes still closed? Good. On the count of 3, I want you to open them. And when you do, look straight ahead, but pay attention to what is in your peripheral vision. I'm confident that you will be very surprised. Remember, you can only see them when they don't want to be seen, at first. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. So, my lovely listeners, I hope you enjoyed that incredible story by Kenneth Cole. I will link to Kenneth Cole's author page down in the description near the top. Please check that out. This story was spectacular, in my opinion. The way he set this up, and then that ending where it was back to second person, was just perfectly done. So, Kenneth, thank you kindly for letting me read the story. Genuinely appreciate it, and I hope to read more by you someday in the future. All that said, friends, if you enjoyed this story and would like more content like this, please consider joining the Nevermore. To join the Nevermore, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button and the bell button next to it. You can also support the Nevermore by doing things like following me on Twitter, liking me on Facebook, joining my subreddit, or supporting me on Patreon or Ko-fi. All of these do something to support the Nevermore and to support the growth of the Nevermore, and every single one of them is greatly appreciated. There's also a link where you could submit a story to me if you have one that you would like me to read, and if you have one you'd like me to read, please send it to me. I would love to feature your story on my channel. Once again, friends, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope you're having a great week, and I hope to see you on the next video. But until then, please sleep well.